ध्यायेत् शारदचन्द्रसुन्दरमुखम् ताम्रारविन्देक्षणम् भक्ताभीष्टवराभयप्रदकरम् कौपीनमात्रोज्ज्वलम् स्वात्मानन्दरसानुभूतिविवशम् सर्वानवद्याङ्गकम् श्रीमन्तं श्रीरमणीश्वरं गुरुवरं योगासनाध्यासितं ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणीश्वरं ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणीश्वरं ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणीश्वरम् हृदयकुहरमध्ये केवलं ब्रह्ममात्रम् यहमहमिति साक्षादात्मरूपेण भाति हृदि विषमनसा स्वं चिन्वतामच्युतव पवनचलनरोधा आत्मनिष्ठो भवत्वम्। Namo Ramana. We will commence the Friday Atma Vicharam by listening to Bhagavan's Upadesham. We have been listening to Bhagavan's Upadesham from the book Ramana Answers, Self-Enquiry 1900 to 1950, a compilation of all the answers given by Bhagavan on the subject of Atma Vichara. This wonderful compilation has been done by our founder president, Sri A.R. Natarajanji, and we have been looking at the question and answers put to Bhagavan between 1936 to 1950. After listening to today's question and answer, meditating upon it by Bhagavan's grace, we will then have a 20 minutes Atma Vichara session. Following that, our President Sharada Akka would be talking about Atma Vichara as it has been contemplated in Ramana Gita by Ganapati Muni. And then we will have the concluding prayers to Bhagavan. In the continuing on the last week's question, the devotee had asked, please tell me the way to the self. Bhagavan has said, is it necessary to show the way in the interior of your own home? This is within you. So Bhagavan had asked the devotee to turn within and search for the self within. Then the devotee asks, what do you advise me to do? Bhagavan says, why should you do anything? Only keep quiet. Why not do so? Each one must do according to his own state. So, when we have been told to turn to the interior of ourself and find out, then the obvious question is, one, we feel that we have the ability to interiorly turn and look, so what do we need to do is the question. Outside, if I am told to look at a mountain or to look at that beautiful car standing there, it's quite easy, but the interior, the more closer that it is, where there is no objective vision per se, which we can grossly see and identify with. So the question obviously comes, what should I do? And here, Bhagavan is trying to ask a question. Why should you do anything? Now, by putting that question, Bhagavan is asking your strong identification with ourself as an individual, separate from the self, capable of doing something and knowing the self. This reminds me of like being inside the self, we being assuming a separate identity, and we want to experience the self as an object. It is something like, it seems there were two fishes which were swimming in the ocean, and one of the big old fish just swam by and asked, "How is the ocean?" And these two young fishes started thinking, "What is he talking about? What ocean?" So we don't realize that verily it is because of the ocean that we are surviving. The fishes don't realize that. It is somewhat similar to that with us also. When we are asked, why should go turn within and see the self which alone is, our question is, what should I do? Bhagavan is asking, why should you do anything? This question is very, very important for us to meditate upon. This sense of doing, if you look at it, why does it arise? Because of my individual idea and my idea that I am this body, I am having all this instrument called intellect, mind, this physical body with the instruments of cognition, with the instruments with which I can do like my hands and legs. So all these tools that I am having, which is what I am. I'm not only believing that these are tools to me, I'm very strongly believing that these are me alone, me only. So I can use any of this instrument, which are me, mine, and do something. And therefore, this question, why Bhagavan puts us to remove that identity? Why should you do anything? Is the question. And when we really meditate on that question, why do I feel like doing anything? Then we see that this very idea that these instruments, this mind, intellect, and these organs and body and everything, I feel these are mine, this is me. That fundamental idea is the reason why I feel I can do. And therefore, by questioning, by meditating on it, we see this wrong identity, how we get into this wrong identity again and again and again and again. Even when we are here, sitting in the Atma Vichara, trying to meditate on these things, we are identified with these, with the ability to speak. We may get identified with the ability to listen. We may get identified with the ability to understand. We may get identified with the ability that I will remember it. And we may get identified with the ability that I know now. So many possibilities, because the fundamental approach with which we are even entered this satsang is with the idea that I am this entity, and therefore I can listen, I can contemplate, I can understand, I can know, I can hold on to things, I can get to know new things. And fundamentally, we have to understand with this approach, we are again and again reprinting, or we were validating within ourselves that this body is what I am. We have to understand this fundamental mistake, which is why whole Vedanta is trying to remove that you are not the body. But here we are with this idea, with this concept, with this very, very fundamental and root concept with which we do anything, with which we know anything. We are again and again firmly saying that this is me, this body is me. That's why Bhagavan is asking a question, why should you do anything? And only when we sit with that question and meditate, why do I feel like doing anything? Or what do I achieve by doing anything with this idea, with this body? Only when we sit and what have I achieved? What will I achieve? Why has Bhagavan put this question? Why should you do anything? Then we see this fundamental flaw that whenever I feel like knowing or doing, somewhere behind it, I have identified myself with this body, and therefore on its ability to know, its ability to do, and therefore I feel that I can know, I can do, and in a way, the root thing which I want to remove, that I am not this body, I am not paying attention to it at all. Rather, I am affirming it even in the spiritual sadhana that I do. That's why Bhagavan is asking, why should you do anything? It's a very, very important question for us to meditate upon. Bhagavan then says, only keep quiet. Now here is the answer. If at all you have to do anything, just keep quiet. And Bhagavan's teaching here is not of any knowing, not of any doing, but when we keep quiet, that means even when we don't have a thought, absolutely thought-free, or even for a fraction of a minute, when we become completely thought-free, there is our pure presence, there is our pure awareness of the absence of everything, and no claiming of the absence, no claiming of the presence, but the pure experience, then and there, of the pure presence and the pure awareness and the pure peace that we are. And therefore, Bhagavan is saying, we can only transcend this knowing, this doing, this habited, wrong habit of again and again identifying with the body, only by keeping quiet, only by remaining in that natural silence where there is no identification with the body, where there is no identification with the mind, yet there is pure awareness of it, yet there is pure presence of it, yet there is no thoughts about even the presence, even the awareness, even the body and everything. And that pure silence, more again and again and again, which is transcendental here and now of the idea of the body, which is transcendental here and now of the thinker, the doer, the knower, again and again with full vigilance when we attend to it again and again, then here and now, Bhagavan is clearly showing that there is nothing to really do in there, and by doing so, you are we are all in our natural state. We can't even say we are Atmanishta, we are that Atman. So we were Anatmanishta. We let go the Anatmanishtata. That's all. The Atmanishtata is in our natural state. So consciously what we need to do is let go this Anatmanishta. That's what Bhagavan is saying here. And he's not only saying the answer, and he's saying, why not do so? He's asking a question. When I am saying, only keep quiet, why not do so? Why do you want to do anything at all? And then each one must do according to his own state. See, somewhere fundamentally, Bhagavan is saying this wrong idea with which we do anything, even if we come to the satsang that I am a body, and even if I am sitting silent and I am identified that I am sitting in silence, every time it is I, the individual, trying to do something, and we have to consciously let go of it. So, therefore, every time a thought rises, we will be identified with the thought with the subtlety of how much our sadhana is. Our thoughts also will be that subtle, but yet making us identify ourselves as an individual. Therefore, it has to be transcended. Only in that silence we experience ourselves. Therefore, even the subtlest and the subtlest, we have to subject ourselves. If at all it rises, makes us believe to be real and captures our attention, we should diligently inquire to whom is this thought, who am I? Because we have to transcend from that subtle identifications also and become completely thought free. As Bhagavan says, the thought free state is felt as God. So that is our natural state. And for that, Bhagavan has given us Atma Vichara, which is a diligent way to question everything until the questioner also gets dissolved in the real answer, which is the pure presence, the pure silence, the pure awareness that we are. Until that, we should continuously, diligently question every rising thought, says Bhagavan. The immense grace of Bhagavan, with which alone we have come to this most direct path, the enquiry which makes us again and again get established in our natural state. Let us do Atma Vichara for the next 20 minutes. नमो भगवते श्रीरमणाय। नमो रमणा। over to Sharda Akka.
Namo Ramana. Prostrations to Ramana, shining as the self in all beings. By the immense grace of the self manifest as Ramana, in this part of today's satsang, we are meditating on Bhagavan's teachings as set out in the verses of Ramana Gita, which is a dialogue between Bhagavan and devotees. They are Ganapati Muni and his disciples like Devarata, Karshni, Yoganatha and others. And their questions were answered by Bhagavan. And these questions and answers were compiled by Ganapati Muni into 18 chapters on the lines of Bhagavad Gita. And 18 chapters. And this chapter we are meditating on is the 7th chapter, which is specifically the chapter on self-enquiry. The questioner in this chapter is Karshni. And all the answers have been recorded by the Muni in Sanskrit verse. So, like Vedavyasa composed the Bhagavad Gita, which was given as Upadesha by Krishna to Arjuna, in this case, Ganapati Muni has composed the verses of Ramana Gita, which is the Upadesha given by Bhagavan, not only to the Muni himself, but also to several other questioners, including also Muni's wife Vishalakshi has asked and received a very, very significant reply from Bhagavan. So we have these questioners. In this chapter, 7th chapter, the questioner is Karshni. And he has posed to Bhagavan the question, what is self-enquiry? And what are its benefits? This is the opening of the chapter, self-enquiry. And as a background to this chapter, we have had the very first chapter is the Muni himself asking the question as to whether certain kinds of meditations, how efficacious they are in getting self-knowledge. And he has got the answer from Bhagavan that only self-abidance can give us the truth, and practice is important. It is essential to practice and abide in the self. That is the very opening Upadesha. And then Bhagavan himself goes on to give the Ekashloki, which in another context Muni has said is the center of the entire Ramana Gita, in which Bhagavan says, Hridaya Kuhara Madhye Kevalam Brahmamatram Hyahamahamiti Sakshat Atmarupena Bhati. He gives us the nature of the self, which is ever effulgent and shining within the heart or as the heart, as I, aham iti sakshat. Kevalam brahmamatram, there is nothing apart from it. That which is all enveloping, that which is all pervading, that is the Brahman, and that alone is, and that is shining within us, that reveals itself to us as the Aham Spurana. It shines as Aham, 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 Aham. So, Aham, Aham iti sakshat atmarupena bhati. And there Bhagavan, in the second part of the verse, tells us our duty is to enter Hridi Visha, enter the heart, enter the heart. And he gives methods. He says, how can one enter? one can enter with the mind alone. Only the mind has to enter into this subtle territory which actually transcends the mind. So when the mind enters, then the territory of the mind itself is transcended. So the mind enters into the heart or seeks to enter into the heart. See, the effort is to try to enter. Actually, one cannot enter because it is beyond the mind. So that effort, Hridivisha Manasa Swam Chinvata, by thinking, by searching for the source of the I, by searching for the I, Majjata, by merging, diving into the source, or Pavana Chalana Rodha. These are the methods which Bhagavan had given. So, actually, in chapter 7, the questioner, one may say, goes back to that. How am I to do Swam Chinvata? How am I to do this Swam Vichara? How am I to do the Atma Vichara? In the intermediary chapters, chapter 3, the importance of self-abidance is given. The importance of doing self-enquiry to abide in the self is given. Because unless something is very important to us, we will really not give the whole energy to it. So first Muni covers the Mukhya Kartavyam. It is the most important duty. And after that, we come with Bhagavan to the science of the heart. Because this is the place, this is the energy to which we are returning through self-enquiry. And then he also talks about mind control as a preamble to the chapter on self-enquiry. Mind control is fine, but even in the mind control chapter, Bhagavan has indicated that mind control can take the mind to temporary quietness, but not to total abidance. So enquiry alone is required. Therefore, it is in the rightness that of the appropriateness of the time that in this sequence of chapters, Karshni now asks, what is self-enquiry? And Bhagavan says, self-enquiry is abiding in the source of the I thought. The I thought is the source of all thoughts, and the source of the I thought has to be sought and one has to abide there. That is self-enquiry. And what is the use of self-enquiry was also asked by Karshni once again, because Daivarata had asked, what is the paramount duty? That is a duty. But sometimes I may or may not want to do my duty. Are there any other benefits for me by doing self-enquiry? What if I'm not interested in doing my duty? That is implicit, or we may take it as an analytical or a commentary on that thought. That having been told by Bhagavan that the paramount duty is to abide in the self, then why is he being asked by Karshni? And why is that question being included here by Muni as to what is the benefit to be attained from self-enquiry? It is because though something is prescribed as a duty, we may still, the mind may either consciously or otherwise look for certain other benefits, personal benefits. So Bhagavan says that the fruit of self-enquiry is the highest benefit. It is not only the highest duty, it is the highest benefit to be attained. There is no phalanam avadhi soyam asti netodhikam phalam. There is no fruit higher than the fruit that can be attained through self-enquiry. And in fact, it is the amalgamation of all fruits, all purposes, all the roads culminate over here, says Bhagavan. Having said that, then Karshni asks Bhagavan, what is the qualification for pursuing self-enquiry? It may give me the highest fruits, it may be the highest duty to perform, but am I qualified to take up self-enquiry? Is the question implied over here. Because if I have to do self-enquiry, must I not be qualified for it? If I do not have the requisite qualifications, what would be the use of my taking up self-inquiry? And Kashni had also asked, is it possible to reach through other means? But Bhagavan has said that only siddhis, great achievements can happen. Adbhuta siddhaya sadhya upayantarataschayaha. Other means can give you great success, great achievements, even mystical powers, mystical experiences, but only self-inquiry will liberate. Bhagavan has said, despite that, see, this is actually because many of us, either obviously or otherwise, may have these doubts. That is why Bhagavan has allowed these doubts to be asked and has answered them, has clarified the purpose of it. So we have that Bhagavan has said that is the highest fruit. Still Kashni has asked him what are the qualifications. Then Bhagavan says, okay, if you want to know, you should have complete indifference towards the body and sensory experiences. If you do have that, then the fruits of self-inquiry will be easily relished, easily savored by you. Not that self-inquiry will not have fruits if this is not the case, but they may not be fully experienced, or the best fruits may not be there. You see, when a seed is sown, if a seed is sown in hard, rocky soil, it takes time for that seed to break into plant and then grow into tree. If it is a desert, then it's difficult. It has to wait for water. We see in the desert also, during the rainy season, it's so beautiful because the desert actually breaks into bloom. You can see so many flowers in the desert, cactus flowers, no doubt, but flowers, beautiful. But that is only when it rains. At other times, it's a parched ground. So the seed of self-inquiry may be there. It will flower at the right time. But the right time has to come. And what is the right time? The right time is a time when the mind is ready to dive within to its source. Why would the mind be ready to dive within to its source? If it is engaged completely in trying to satisfy the needs of the physical entity, trying to satisfy the needs of the body, will the mind turn inward? The mind will not turn inward at such a time because the mind will be busy. But a mind which is disinterested in that which is happening to this physical entity will not worry too much about it, but will start looking for the real source. What is the use of focusing on this entity, this limited entity, which is limited to apparently having a form? What is the use of thinking about the needs of this form? Let me try to find out what my true nature is. As the eagerness to find out the true nature grows, the mind will automatically get tuned with it. And this will grow when there is simultaneously, these happen together. The indifference to the sense experiences and the eagerness to have the experience of the self go hand in hand. The more one tries to have the experience of the self, the more one will become indifferent to other things. And the more one becomes indifferent to other things, the more the mind will go turn inward back to its source. So Bhagavan says this is the qualification. There is no other qualification. The qualification is basically I want self-awareness. I want self-awareness because I am not interested in anything else. So that is the qualification which Bhagavan is putting. Not any other knowledge. See, one must also see here that Bhagavan has not given any other requirements for self-enquiry. He has not said we need to be well read in the Shastras. We need to have a background. We need to know about everything regarding self enquiry. Well read in the Shastras means not just Vedas or Upanishad, not even the Shastra of self enquiry. He has not made it a condition that we should know. We should have read Upadesha Saram. We should have read Ulladinarpada. We should have read Ramana Gita. No, he is not saying that. He says, if you are not worried about the body, if you're disinterested, if you want, if you have eagerness to know your true nature, and therefore are disinterested in all other things, self-enquiry is available to you. There is no other criterion. He does not say you should have done about 20 years of japa or so many crores or even 20 years of mano nigraha or 100 years or 50 years or 5 years or even 5 minutes. So one thing we can see from this is that the moment, every moment, at any moment, when the mind says, oh, of what use is all this? That moment is the right moment to turn inwards. At that moment, we are ripe for self-enquiry. The next moment, maybe our mind is longing for something. At that moment, obviously, we cannot do self-enquiry. Mind has already moved outwards. Mind has already gone behind the grasping of an object. But the moment it questions, oh, what use is this? Bhagavan says, immediately you can turn it within through self-enquiry. And every moment is different in our lives. So we may be ripe at some moments and not ripe at other moments. Let us not worry about the moments when we are not ripe. Let us make the best of the moments when there is ripeness, when there is readiness. Those moments let us utilize. Sri R. Natarajan, the founder of Ramana Maharshi Center for Learning, and also the first one to make an English translation of this work, the Ramana Gita, along with the commentary, he would always emphasize this point in his talks and sharings on Bhagavan's teachings. He would say, whenever the mood is there, utilize it. Set aside everything at that time. You may be in the middle of the office work. Just for 5 minutes, put it aside, if possible, and dive within. Because at that moment, there is ripeness for self-enquiry, and that grace is calling us. The self is calling us at that moment. So Bhagavan says that is the readiness, that is the ripeness. And then Karshi went on to ask, okay, if we are ripe and ready, is it okay to do other things like snana, sandhya, japa, home, all other practices, or would they be a waste of time? Then Bhagavan says, if your attachment as to the body has just started waning, it is coming and going. There are moments of deep attachment and moments of maybe mild attachment. So when that is the case, there are benefits to be attained from other practices as well. One may continue to do all the other practices. But those practices are only to strengthen the very enquiry. They are not ends in themselves. That is why Bhagavan says, for those who are at the beginning, Shri Arambhinam, those who are beginners in self-enquiry, it is a support. So the point is not to continue to hold on to other practices. But Bhagavan says the other practices may be used as supports for self-enquiry. In what way do they support self-enquiry? Self-enquiry actually cuts away all thoughts, prescribed obligatory activities and other good activities like snanam, sandhya, japam, homam and all that which are mentioned. All the prescribed activities or prior sadhanas prior to self-inquiry, like japa sadhana. So if one keeps oneself engaged in these sadhanas, whenever one's mind is not abiding in the source at such times, or when one's mind is even not turning within through self-inquiry, then if one observes all these practices, they will lead to purity, more of purity of the mind, so that the mind can be turned inwards. And Bhagavan also says they will lead to purity of mind, because whenever one is engaged in a good practice, at that point of time, one is not doing something bad. When one is chanting the japa, one's tongue is not repeating or speaking something bad, or even something which has got no use and is absolutely indifferent. It's just an indifferent activity. We may be speaking so many things. Instead of that, if the tongue is repeating the name, and that is why the great ones like Muruganar Swami, they say, they have songs on Bhagavan wherein they say that even if I forget to think of you, my tongue will repeat your name. I may not think of you, I may forget. I may sometimes forget you, Ramana, but my tongue shall forever your name utter. So that way, that habit, the tongue is engaged in something good. So every now and then the attention will come to the japa instead of going somewhere else. So we dwelt upon how all these practices are good practices, in that Bhagavan says they prevent negative thoughts, they block the time, they occupy our time, and thereby do not allow us to become wayward, to get lost in unnecessary and negative thought patterns. So what happens by that is that the stage is set, or the space is left clear for self-inquiry. Since there is not much of distraction, and since mostly one observes these vows as a part of one's duty, there may not be huge sense of attachment to it, and therefore it is easier to turn within through self-inquiry with a purified mind. But it is not to say that these activities are absolutely essential, says Bhagavan. If one is ever abiding in the self, then one does not take up any activity out of choice. We have been discussing the verse on Ulladu Narpadu in Ulladu Narpadu on the state of a jnani. What is there for him to do? In Upadeshasaram also Bhagavan says, Krityamasti kim swasthitim yataha. If one is abiding in the self, what is left to do? But we see the great ones engaged in activity. So for our sake, as an explanation to us, actually Bhagavan would say, who sees? Is there something that moves at all? Is there something that is seen? But if I say, Bhagavan, I see you acting, he says, it is for the sake of the lokakshema. There is no other purpose. There is no conscious purpose. It happens. And it happens for the sake of the good of the entire world. And by chance, if it doesn't happen, if such a one does not follow any injunctions, there will be no detrimental effect. There will be no harm coming to such a person, because such is the greatness of self-inquiry that Bhagavan is indicating to us over here. It leads to steady self-abidance. And if one is pursuing self-inquiry, and because one is pursuing self-inquiry, if by chance one has failed to do something else, it does not matter, says Bhagavan over here, once again reminding us that self-inquiry is such a powerful path back to the self, it is purifying, and it goes beyond purity to the absolute silence of the self. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri.
अपार सच्चित सुखबरिराशे यस्योर्मिमात्रं भुवनं समस्तं गुहाहितं तं रमणं गभीरं चिन्ताविहीनं हृदि चिन्तयामि चिन्ताविहीनं हृदि चिन्तयामि. नमो Ramana.
Namo Ramana. Thank you, Dileep.